Welcome back. You're watching World Talks, and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. Last weekend, the British newspaper The Daily Mail published an article describing the phenomenon of the Polish exodus of nearly 100,000 compatriots. According to the article, people who went to the UK years ago in search of a better life are now returning to their homeland. Is the mass exodus a reality, or this description is blown out of proportion? To discuss this, I'm joined by Professor Iain Begg, Professorial Research Fellow at the London School of Economics, who recently published his research report, Brexit, a critical audit in the cold light of day, including that very subject. Professor, thank you for joining me on World Talks.
Good to be with you again.
Pleasure. So what is your assessment of that very claim that Poles left and are still leaving in what is considered an exodus?
I think there are two or three things going on. The first is Polish success. The Polish economy has grown very significantly, and it's approaching the level of GDP per head of the richer Western European countries. So there's a strong incentive for Poles to return to their home country to benefit from the growing Polish economy. The second thing is that some sociological research finds that many Poles who had come, say, in their 20s, single, are now settling down. They've had enough of the UK, and they think it's a good time to make that transition to returning to their home country, not because anything has gone particularly wrong, but simply because they reached a stage in life where a decision is worth making about returning. And the third element that's sometimes cited, but I think has been exaggerated, is hostility to migrants in the UK. Polish workers who came to the UK have generally been welcomed. For example, unlike France, we are very keen to have Polish plumbers because we have so few of our own. But there was a degree of hostility immediately after Brexit, and that translated into a sense for some Polish citizens that it was not the best place to be in that new context.
So obviously, Polish citizens were the members of society. They were actually part of the community when it comes to paying taxes, when it comes to working in different sectors. How do you think Poles leaving the UK is actually going to affect not only the economy, but the UK in terms of its society?
It's going to have a number of effects. One for the economy is that some Polish workers were employed in relatively low status, low wage jobs, particularly in fruit picking. Poles and Lithuanians were very prominent in some parts of the UK economy in this respect. Also, Polish workers have been very substantial in the building industries. So for the British economy, which is anxious to build many more houses, that's one of the promises of the Labour government. It was going to build 1.5 million new houses over the 5 years of its mandate. They're going to struggle with that because the number of qualified British workers has not been going up to offset those returning to Poland. And then you have a social effect, which is that there are entrenched Polish communities in the UK, in bits of London, other bits of the country. And as more Poles tend to drift away back to their home country, you might see a watering down of that commitment to being Polish Brits, if I can call it that.
So which one would it be if you were to make that decision based on the data that you've collected? Is this phenomenon, should it be called a rotation of migrants, or is it complete abandonment?
It certainly isn't abandonment, because there are still quite a large number of Poles in the UK, but for the reasons I've already mentioned, a significant proportion of these people are now saying it's time to reflect again on whether the UK is the best choice for their individual futures. And sometimes as well, you have mixed families. There will be a Polish woman or a Polish man who's married somebody from another nationality, not necessarily English or Scottish, but who decides that they want to take their family to somewhere different. So there's a whole range of explanations going on simultaneously. And I don't think we can say there is one dominant explanation.
Mm-hmm. Don't you find it interesting how the very media that was actually talking and warning about large numbers of Poles living in the UK before Brexit are now raising the alarm, saying that so many Polish citizens are in fact leaving the UK, leaving a big gap behind?
Yes, but then whoever said that the British media needed to be consistent? They go with the story of the day, and it's quite clear that there will be losses to the UK economy and society from a substantial number of Poles leaving because of the jobs they do, because they're well integrated into UK society, and that's going to have a negative impact. But it's also worth noting that the overall migration statistics in the UK have been very erratic. The net migration coming in from European Union countries has become negative. More European Union citizens are now leaving the UK than coming into it. But that's been more than offset by a very substantial increase, which peaked in 2022, of migrants coming from other parts of the world, from India, from Nigeria, for example. So we're having transformative effects on the UK society, none of which was really planned or expected.
The UK media cites an interesting term. When they refer to this mass exodus of Polish people, they speak of broken Britain. What do you think hides behind that term? Could you give us an explanation of what could that be?
Broken Britain is maybe an exaggeration, but there are things which don't work very well. Our transport system, for instance, the water supply system has many instances of sewage being deposited in rivers. The health service is struggling, and there is one area where Polish nurses in particular have been very prominent in the UK health system. And even at what might sound like a fairly trivial level, as I drive down my street at home, I'm hit by potholes all the time. So there's a sense that the British state hasn't been delivering the public services, which have been, on the other hand, improving in Poland because the economy is becoming richer.
In your research report, Brexit, a critical audit in the cold light of day, which I mentioned at the very start of our conversation, you mentioned the policies, the migration policies that were part of the reason for Polish people leaving, the ones introduced by the Home Office. What were those that pushed some of the Poles away?
Well, there was something called the hostile environment, which was mainly targeted at migrants from other parts of the world, not so much from the EU, but it spilled over into affecting EU citizens living in the UK. There was also a sense that part of the rationale for Brexit was to generate jobs for British citizens and not to rely so much on importing labour as it had been happening in the previous decade, indeed since 2003, when the first Poles started to move in significant numbers to the UK. Then there is the economic impact. Once again, if you're living in a country which is not growing, as the British economy is not at present, you think, well, where does the prosperity come from? How am I going to advance? Can I start a small business and prosper, or should I think again? So again, all these things are coming together to give a motivation to many Poles and Lithuanians and French and German citizens, even Italians and Greeks, to think about returning to their home countries.
As my final question, I wanted to ask you about, do you think that the UK will have, at any point in time in the near future, have anything to offer back to those people who potentially left the country, or the new ones, the new migrants who would want to move to the UK, to be able to bring them back into the fold?
Well, it's always going to offer something, but the challenge for the UK economy is lackluster economic growth. And if you don't have economic growth, you're not generating the new opportunities which are going to be attractive to a migrant population, especially in the case of Polish migrants into the UK who were predominantly young, often single, very keen to make more of themselves. That was a great draw of the British economy in 2004 when Poland joined the European Union. Now that lackluster growth isn't translating itself into unemployment, but it does mean that the opportunities are being pushed further up the skills list. The UK system is mainly keen on bringing in migrants who are in well-paid jobs, have high skills, and so on. So that means that a segment of those Poles and others who come to the UK economy are to some extent ruled out of new opportunities. And one thing I found in my research was that there's a big difference between those already established in the UK who were not greatly affected by Brexit and those potential future migrants who were seeing it as a more difficult challenge to come to the UK.
Thank you, Professor, for joining me on the program. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Ian Begg, Professor Ian Begg, Professorial Research Fellow at the London School of Economics, was my guest. And so this would be all for now here on World Talks. I'm Claudia Czerwińska, and I do hope to see you back here on TVP World in just a moment.